Configuring Azure SQL Managed Identity is a straightforward process that enables secure and seamless authentication to Azure SQL databases without the need for manually managing credentials. To begin, it is essential to understand the concept of managed identities, which are Azure Active Directory identities assigned to Azure resources, allowing them to authenticate to other Azure services without needing credentials. First, register your Azure SQL database with Azure Active Directory by going to the Azure portal, navigating to your Azure SQL database, and clicking on Azure Active Directory in the left-hand menu. Here, you can configure the Azure Active Directory admin for your database. Next, enable the system-assigned managed identity for your Azure resource, such as an Azure virtual machine or an Azure function. This is done in the Azure portal by navigating to the resource, clicking on Identity in the left-hand menu, and toggling the status to On. After enabling the managed identity, you need to configure the role assignments for your managed identity in Azure Active Directory. This is done by navigating to Azure Active Directory in the Azure portal, clicking on Enterprise Applications, and searching for your application. Then, click on Users and Groups, and add the managed identity to the desired role, such as Azure SQL DB contributor. To use the managed identity with your Azure SQL database, you need to create a user in your database for the managed identity. This is done by connecting to your database using SQL Server Management Studio or the Azure Data Studio, and running the Create User statement. Finally, to authenticate to your Azure SQL database using the managed identity, you can use the Azure Identity Library in your application code to acquire an access token for the managed identity, and then use this token to connect to your database. Best practices for configuring Azure SQL Managed Identity include monitoring and auditing the use of managed identities, regularly reviewing and updating role assignments, and using least privilege access to minimize security risks. By following these steps and best practices, you can securely and efficiently configure Azure SQL Managed Identity for your Azure resources, and take advantage of the benefits of managed identities in Azure.